Well, bienvenue à toutes et à tous. Welcome. So we are back to discuss a matter that basically was high in the news a few months ago, that is glyphosate. This debate has seen quite a lot of ideology, and well, basically the most ideological about that have taxed us to be ideological about it. Whereas what we've tried to do from the outset, we Greens, is based on or positions on science as a basis, and another basis which is a principle of precaution, which is written into EU law, and not just any EU law, the EU treaties. So that's really basic fundamental law. And our position is that the decision about this substance, but also others, and we think of course of endocrine disruptors, has been taken against the principle of precaution. Now, since some people claim that we don't have enough science about this substance called glyphosate and the formulations that use glyphosate, we are very glad, and I will say honored, that the Ramazzini Institute and Mrs. Belpocci and Mr. Mandrioli, who have carried out new and serious research about the substance, have decided to, have asked us to host the first presentation of their results. So without further ado, I will pass on to them. I think Mrs. Belpocci, you... Yes. It's something and then... As you wish. So Marco Affronte has joined our group, you may remember, more than a year ago, actually. More than a year ago. And I'm glad he did, because when I see what his former party is doing in Italy at the moment, I must say that I have serious concerns. But that is another matter, not for today. Marco.
Grazie.
Thank you, Philippe. Just briefly, first of all, I'm very proud that the Ramazzini Institute has come here to this event hosted by the Greens to introduce its results to the European Parliament. These are preliminary results of the study that they are carrying out, and I'm also very proud of the fact that this institute has been chosen to carry out this study. It's a pilot study which has been conducted by public fundraising, and I'm very pleased that this study is well underway, because it's been funded by 30,000 members of the general public who feel that this is an important study to be conducted. We have fought an important battle as the Green Party, because we feel that the evaluation of independent studies is something which is very important and different from some of the studies which have so far been carried out by the industry and others. And we are worried about the fact that glyphosate, or the use of glyphosate, has been prolonged for a further 5 years. So we have a particular position on this, and at this juncture in my country, in Italy, there is no political group which is working along the lines that I feel are important, and this is why I'm here today. So I'm involved in the committee which is looking into pesticides. I'm a member, as you've been told, of the Greens now. We've been looking into glyphosate, and we feel that it is absolutely crucial that our citizens in Europe are aware of what is happening in this context. So thank you very much for having come here today, and I should now like to give the floor to those who have joined us today from the Ramazzini Institute. I give the floor first to Fiorella Belpocci. First of all, I should like to thank Marco and the European Greens Group for having given us the opportunity and for showing us such hospitality here. It's a great pleasure to be here today. I should also like to thank the 30,000 members of the general public who have supported the Ramazzini Institute in this, and this has enabled us to carry out the first stage of this study. I think that the tenacity that we've shown in our activity is something which is very important. It hasn't been an easy road to go down. It's a totally independent study. In 2015, 2016, we've seen a few reports in the national Italian press asking what our position was on the current decisions in glyphosate, and we gave our counter ideas then. Now, I think what is important is that there were certain things lacking in previous studies. IARC had carried out independent studies, but they weren't very robust, and EFSA had taken on board the recommendations of the BFR and others, the German agency, and a lot of issues which were looked at in this study came from information which remained confidential. So, in view of the fact that glyphosate is so widely used in Italy and in Europe, it's important that something else is done. We feel that it is our duty, and one of the comments which we have made on this is that whatever the results, whether or not glyphosate is carcinogenic or not, we are seeing glyphosate used in such high doses, and I think it is important to look once again on its effect on human beings. We need to look at the doses. Real life doses are important. So what we wanted to do is to evaluate the use of glyphosate in herbicides, carry out a long-term study which would show the possible carcinogenic effects and the effects on reproduction. Well, to be absolutely honest, looking at the daily dose as assessed by the US Environment Protection Agency, the basis of this as a study is not adequate. We have looked at this in view of new developments. We need to look at how we have to be more cautious in certain areas. We have noted that in studies carried out in the past, laboratories have been involved, and to arrive at the results of their studies, we realize that there has not been an adequate approach, and what we are trying to do is to involve a wide range of different people and ensure that our study is totally independent. In 2022, we want to get a re-evaluation of glyphosate, and we don't want to end up with the situation that we had last November. For that we need to get funds, and it's important that our politicians in Europe, in the European Parliament, on the basis of the EFSA studies, decide that either glyphosate is carcinogenic or it's not carcinogenic, or it could have other effects. So it's very important that citizens need to have their confidence in the institutions restored, because we've seen so many different messages. And I think it's important that the trust in our results is restored. Our citizens want to know what is happening. They want to follow what is happening. They want to see the research developed. There's a lot that has been lacking in the US and in Europe, and our pilot study, as I said, has been funded by private people, by the public at large, and this is the road that we wanted to take. We want we've invited the ARRC, we have invited the regulatory authorities to accompany us in the course of our study, to look into what our researchers are doing, carrying out a study on such a widely disseminated substance that it affects millions and millions of people at low and very low doses, so real life exposure. And what we are doing has triggered off discussions once again on glyphosate and glyphosate-based herbicides. So thank you very much for inviting us here today. We hope that what we are doing will represent a first step which will lead to a whole series of constructive results which are going to benefit public health. Thank you. And I should now like to give the floor to Dr. Mandrioli, who is going to present the results of the study to us, preliminary results.
To present here today to you the results of our glyphosate pilot study.
Lamberts, Philippe.
We started our glyphosate pilot study thanks to the generosity of the Ramazzini Institute Associates, where we aim to gather some general information concerning the reproductive endpoints, in particular exposure and effect biomarkers, prior to a comprehensive long-term study, in particular addressing the issue of currently admitted doses. And the partners of our work are independent institutions from all over the world, including the University of Bologna, the Italian National Institute of Health, the Genoa Hospital San Martino, the Mount Sinai School of Medicine of New York, and the George Washington University in the US. We tested glyphosate and its formulation Roundup Bioflow, which is one of the formulations currently used in Europe and one of the formulations that was evaluated during the renewal of glyphosate license here in Europe. And we administer 1.75 milligram per kilogram of body weight per day of both test substances, which is equal to the acceptable daily dietary exposure in the US. We aim to study starting from pregnancy at gestational day 6 up to 6 weeks after weaning and 13 weeks after weaning of exposure for both glyphosate and Roundup. And we aim to test a great number of endpoints in this study, both in dams and in the pups. What we observed is that the great majority of glyphosate is excreted unchanged in the urine, and that both glyphosate and AMPA, which is its principal metabolite, were excreted at an increased level in glyphosate and Roundup exposed animals. And we also noticed an increased excretion, depending on time, of glyphosate in urine in animals exposed up to 6 weeks after weaning and 13 weeks after weaning. Here we can observe the trend of glyphosate excretion in urine, which is depending on the time of exposure for both glyphosate and its formulate. And therefore, we might assume that a mechanism of bioaccumulation might be occurring in the animals exposed to glyphosate and Roundup because of this relation between the duration of the treatment and the level of glyphosate that we measure in urine. We also assessed the effects on microbiome, because microbiome have been associated with a great number of diseases, from obesity to diabetes, and we sampled fecal samples at different time points in order to assess these effects. Here you can observe the effects in pups, and in particular during the development you can see that I might help you here with the arrow. Here you can observe that glyphosate-based herbicides alter in a statistically significant way the microbiome of the exposed animals, and that the formulation treated animals, so animals treated with Roundup, had alterations that were more significant and were different from the one that we measured also in glyphosate-exposed animals only. So, not only we measured this effect during a sensitive window of susceptibility, thus development, in particular what would be the equivalent of the prepubertal age in humans, but moreover we observed different effects also of Roundup and glyphosate that might suggest a possible synergistic effect of the mixed formulation. And it's quite important also to elucidate whether this alteration will lead downstream to health effects, and this can be done only in a long-term setting. Other results that we had and are currently under peer review are for reproductive endpoints. We measured a statistically significant increase anogenital distance in female and male rats treated with Roundup and in male rats treated with glyphosate. We observed a statistically significant delay of the first testosterone in female rats treated with Roundup, and a statistically significant increase in the micronuclear frequency in male and female rats treated with Roundup, which is a sign of genotoxicity. So again, the effect of Roundup seemed to be more marked than the effect of glyphosate alone. So 3 manuscripts have been accepted for publication and will be published by the end of the month in Environmental Health, Scientific Journal, International Scientific Journal. And what we observed is that glyphosate-based herbicides, thus glyphosate and its formulation, at currently admitted dose were able to alter certain important biological parameters, including microbiome, genotoxicity, and the sexual development parameters. That glyphosate-based herbicide induced bioaccumulation of glyphosate, and importantly, glyphosate and its formulation might have different effects as exemplified by the effect that we observed in the microbiome. Therefore, we believe that now a long-term study is necessary to confirm our initial evidence and have further identification of the hazard and risk that might be related to glyphosate-based herbicides. Thank you.
Grazie, invito il dottor Magnoli a raggiungerci per le...
Thank you very much, Dr. Magnoli. Now, I shall give the floor to you in a moment. We have noted that there are certain effects, bioaccumulation which may result, certain bioparameters can be affected, such as reproductive effects, etc. And it's all based on the daily dosage, the real-life dose, which we see of glyphosate and glyphosate herbicides. So I should now like to, after having thanked the speakers, open the floor for questions to them.
Angelo Di Mambro per l'ANSA.
Now, for ANSA. Now, just briefly, could you tell us what's the difference between the study which you have just presented compared to studies which we have had previously, particularly that published towards the end of 2017?
Noi non abbiamo pubblicato.
We didn't publish any results then, but when we look at glyphosate and what I mentioned in November 2017, the 20th of November, we received tables which came from a university relating to glyphosate, and we felt it was important to tell our minister that he should take account of the fact, based on this, that even low doses, real-life exposure, should be taken account of. So what we did is we sent out a warning on this. Bioaccumulation had not yet been evaluated, and one of the results which we have seen the follow-up to this carried out by our colleague is exactly that. So what we are looking at the moment is a warning sign, and today we have not just got the information coming in from a group of experts and scientists, but we're working towards now publication of the data based on the study we've conducted.
From Politico, a question in English, if you don't mind, for Ms. Belpoggi. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on the Ramazzini Institute's funding model. So is there a complete ban on private businesses donating money for these studies? Is it only from individuals? And if so, is there a cap on the amount an individual can donate, or can someone donate as much as they like? Thank you.
Thank you for this question. It is crucial because we are claiming that this is a completely independent study, and it should be a completely independent study. So we accept a donation from the individuals through the internet, and so we cannot control precisely who is giving this money, but we have had already donation from NGOs. We have had donation from institutions. We have had donation from the World of Cooperative in Italy, and all that is, in any case, independent. There is no conflict of interest. So we will try to avoid any conflict of interest in supporting this research. But, being a crowdfunding, I cannot select who is donating, so it will be something that I don't know.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. And I'm an MEP interested in the matter. I'm also a member of this PEST committee and member of Environment Committee. So you mentioned, and I'm by training medical doctor, and so I have a couple of questions, very simple ones. It was very interesting what you have presented. Of course, it is not. These are only premature, let's say, or preliminary results. And my first question would be, when do you expect to have final results or conclusions of your study in the timeline? Then the second question would be, you presented these problems in sexual maturation of rats. And you didn't mention any cancerogenicity notion. How about this? Did you follow or have you any results in cancerogenicity problem? Thank
you. As regards the first question, we think to publish all the study within the end of the year, 2018. And this because we need all the data, also because we want to start a long-term bioassay that will also expose the possible carcinogenic effect. The cancer is a long-term disease, so you can't explore this kind of disease in a 90-day study. But we did it first of all, to have data in order to monitor glyphosate in a long-term study, and secondly, because we were curious to see what happened at the admitted daily dose. So for the carcinogenic study, and this is my appeal to institutions, to our community, to the European community, to help us in performing a carcinogenicity study with a design that also could evidence other possible adverse effects. And this will happen in 3 years. So we are just in the moment that we have to start because 2022 is not so far.
Any other questions?
Buongiorno, Gallavotti dell'agenzia di
I'm from the Necrons agency, and I've just got a technical question. If glyphosate is carcinogenic, as has been said, are there practical alternatives for agriculture, or, for example, for the railways who use it to kill the weeds on the railway tracks? So I'd just like to know if that is possible, because glyphosate is so widely used. This is a very good question, but I'm not an expert in alternative pesticides. I would, however, like to say that this might be the opportunity to get together a group who could study a possible alternative compound. It would be good to provide some suggestions to our farmers who are rather concerned about what is happening. At the moment, we have a lack of secure data to decide whether or not glyphosate is carcinogenic, or to decide definitely that it is not carcinogenic. So we need, therefore, this independent study, because we have all accepted the verdict of EFSA, but it is rather suspect. Sustainable development should not be suspicious. We need certainty, and this is the reason that we are here and carrying out what we are doing. And I should like to remind you that when we voted in the European Parliament and voted on our resolution, we did say that we would agree that glyphosate could continue to be used for 5 years, because we knew that at this juncture we needed also a time period to move towards alternatives. So we do need a change here. We need to move over to different substances, and we need to also move to a time when our farmers are able to think this through properly and have time to do so, and then change their agricultural methods accordingly.
In questo caso concludo.
If there are no more questions, I shall conclude, and I should like to thank everybody. As soon as this study is published on the 29, we are going to start putting questions to the European Commission and also to EFSA, because, of course, there's a lot of politics involved too, and we need to bring in those who are responsible when we are discussing the issues of glyphosate.
To the next steps of the work.
I hope so.